It's a strange, heavy thing, carrying the quiet, persistent feeling that you've been fractured for a long time. It isn't always a sharp, sudden realization that hits you like a storm. Most often, it's a low-level hum in the background of your days, a constant white noise that colors everything you do. You wake up, and before you've even had a chance to start your morning, there it is, a subtle, familiar drag on your energy, a silent reminder that you are somehow different from the people around you. You look out into the world and see others navigating life with a sense of ease that feels completely inaccessible to you. They seem to move through conversations, workplaces, and relationships with a fluidity that you can't quite grasp. And in those moments, you wonder when the cracks actually appeared. You might not have a single, earth-shattering moment that explains why you feel this way. There isn't always one specific event you can point to and say, "That was when I broke." Instead, you have the persistent, nagging sensation of walking through your life with a hidden fragility. It's the feeling of needing to be endlessly careful, as if being truly seen, truly known, or truly vulnerable might cause you to shatter into pieces that can never be put back together. It's a loneliness that doesn't necessarily come from being alone. It comes from the distance created by the effort of holding yourself together. Think about the way you walk into a room. Think about the way you monitor your own reactions, checking to make sure you aren't saying too much, or feeling too much, or taking up too much space. There is a deep, bone-weary exhaustion in that constant vigilance. You've spent so many years calculating the risks of your own existence that you've forgotten what it feels like to simply exist without a strategy. You have become an expert at patching over the gaps, at pretending the structure is solid when you know, deep down, that you are just holding your breath. This weight is rarely acknowledged because it is so internal. To the outside world, you might appear functional, even successful. You show up, you participate, you do what is expected. But inside, there is a profound disconnect. You are like a house that has been beautifully decorated on the outside, while the foundation underneath feels like it is shifting with every season. You wonder if this is just how it is for everyone, or if you are simply uniquely ill-equipped for the task of living. That doubt is perhaps the heaviest part of all, the fear that this internal fracture is a permanent state, a fundamental flaw in your design that no amount of time or effort can truly mend. But consider, just for a moment, that this feeling of being broken is not a sign that you are damaged. It is a sign that you have endured things that were not meant for you to carry alone. You have been carrying a load that would have flattened anyone else. And the fact that you are still here, still showing up, still reading these words, is proof of a resilience that is rarely given its due credit. You aren't broken in the way we usually think of the word. You are a person who has spent a lifetime compensating for a lack of safety, a lack of softness, a lack of being fully held. The quiet weight you feel is the echo of your own survival. It is the residue of all the times you had to put your own needs aside to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, or to survive an environment that offered you no shelter. You aren't fragile because you are weak. You are fragile because you have been forced to be thin-skinned in a world that never gave you the armor you actually needed. Acknowledging this weight is not about wallowing in the past. It is about finally setting down the luggage you've been carrying for far too long, and realizing that the exhaustion you've been feeling is not a character flaw. It is a logical, human response to the immense, invisible work of trying to stay whole when the world around you made it so difficult to remain that way. You deserve to finally set that weight down and breathe. We often make the mistake of looking at our survival mechanisms and mislabeling them as our personality. For years, you might have looked at your own reflection and believed that your hypervigilance, your deep-seated need for control, or your automatic tendency to pull away when things get too intimate were just who you are. You might have labeled yourself as anxious, guarded, or difficult, internalizing these traits as if they were defects in your character. But these are not your personality. These are not flaws in your essence. They are, quite simply, the intricate, sophisticated structures you built to keep yourself safe when you had no other options. Imagine a house built in a place prone to constant, unpredictable storms. The person living there wouldn't be defective for boarding up the windows, reinforcing the doors, or sleeping in the safest, innermost room. They are simply responding to the reality of their environment. You did exactly that. When you were younger, or perhaps during a long, difficult chapter of your life, your environment demanded a great deal from you. Perhaps it demanded that you remain invisible to avoid criticism, or that you remain perfectly composed to avoid chaos. Perhaps it demanded that you anticipate the moods of others so you could navigate safely around their reactions. Your nervous system, in its infinite wisdom, observed those demands and created a map of the world that prioritized your survival above all else. You learned to stay quiet so you wouldn't be a target. You learned to work harder so you would be indispensable and therefore safe. You learned to suppress your own needs because you discovered that expressing them only led to disappointment or rejection. These were not choices you made consciously. They were brilliant, life-saving adaptations. Your system did exactly what it had to do to get you to this point. And for that, you owe it a moment of profound gratitude rather than judgment. The problem is that we keep using these tools long after the storm has passed. We still walk around with our windows boarded up, unable to see the sunshine. We still keep our guard up, unable to let anyone truly close, even when we are standing in the middle of a peaceful, safe room. You aren't broken, and you aren't stuck in a permanent state of damage. You are someone who successfully adapted to a world that demanded a high cost for your presence. When you start to view your patterns this way, the power dynamic shifts. Instead of looking at your defensiveness with shame, you can start to look at it with curiosity. You can ask yourself, what was this piece of me trying to protect? When you feel the urge to shut down during a conversation, instead of telling yourself that you are bad at connection, you can recognize that a part of you is still trying to keep you safe from a perceived threat. You can offer that part of yourself some grace. You can acknowledge the effort it made. You are not discarding these parts. You are simply beginning to let them know that the environment has changed and that you are now strong enough and safe enough to live differently. Recognizing that these patterns were once your primary form of protection is the essential first step toward loosening their grip. It turns the narrative from "what is wrong with me" to "what did I need to survive?" This shift allows you to breathe for the first time. It creates a space between who you are and what you had to do to survive. It allows you to realize that beneath the layers of protection you built, there is a version of you that has been waiting for the storms to clear. A version of you that is ready to experience the world not just as a place to endure, but as a place to inhabit, to feel, and to eventually thrive within. You have been carrying this architecture of survival for so long that it has become part of your landscape, but you are the architect. And now, slowly, carefully, you have the permission to start changing the design. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." For so long, you have been living under the weight of that word, fate. You look at your patterns, the way you stumble into the same kinds of relational exhaustion, the way you sabotage your own peace just as things start to feel steady, and you label it as just the way you are. You call it a personality trait, or perhaps you call it your lot in life. You speak about your struggles as if they are written in ink, immutable and inevitable. But what if they aren't? What if they are simply a series of shadows that have been following you unnoticed because you've never had the light to turn around and look at them directly? We spend so much of our energy trying to outrun our history, or conversely, trying to pretend it never happened. We build our current lives on top of foundations we haven't inspected, never realizing that the cracks in our walls are echoing the damage from years ago. Acknowledging your history isn't about wallowing in the past. It isn't about picking at old scabs until they bleed. It is about the radical, quiet act of observation. It is about finally turning to the parts of your life that you've pushed into the dark and asking them what they have been trying to tell you all this time. When you feel that familiar pull to close yourself off, or that sudden, sharp panic when someone gets too close, you aren't just reacting to the present moment. You are reacting to a library of stored experiences that have been cataloged in your body. When you feel that tightness in your chest or that hollow sensation in your stomach, try to remember that your body is holding a record of a time when you had to suppress your own needs just to maintain some semblance of stability. It wasn't a failure on your part. You didn't do anything wrong. You were a child or a person in a compromised position, trying to navigate a world that didn't provide the safety you required. You learned to stay quiet so that you wouldn't invite more chaos. You learned to be hyper-aware of others' shifts in mood because your own peace depended on it. This invisible history is the blueprint for your current architecture. When you begin to make the unconscious conscious, you are essentially looking at the blueprints for the first time. You are saying, I see why I did this. I see why I learned to be invisible. I see why I learned to apologize for existing. There is immense power in that recognition. It takes the fate out of your life and replaces it with clarity. It turns the mystery of your suffering into the history of your survival. You begin to understand that the things you have been calling flaws are actually just relics of a time that has ended. You start to see that you aren't doomed to repeat these patterns, because once you can see them, they stop being the invisible drivers of your life. They become things you can look at, hold, and eventually put down. It is a slow, gentle process. You don't have to resolve everything at once. You just have to be willing to look. You just have to be willing to admit that there is a history beneath your feet, and that by acknowledging it, you are finally giving yourself the agency to choose a different path. You are moving from a state of being directed by fate to a state of being the author of your own experience. It's a quiet, profound change. The moment you stop running from your own story and start reading it with the compassion it deserves. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that isn't cured by sleep. It isn't the kind of tiredness that leaves you after a long weekend or a quiet morning. It is the deep, cellular fatigue that comes from living your entire life in a state of high alert. You might not even notice it most of the time, because it has become the default setting for your existence. It is the hum of the internal engine running at top speed, even when the car is parked. You have been monitoring your environment, your words, and your body's responses for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to have an idle state, a moment where you are simply existing without having to actively manage your reality. Think about how much energy it takes to constantly scan for potential complications. You walk into a room, and before you've even said hello, you're reading the energy of the people there. You're measuring their tone, checking for signs of disapproval, or looking for the subtle cues that might suggest things are about to shift. You are always prepared for the transition, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. This isn't paranoia. It is a highly evolved, deeply ingrained form of labor. Your mind has been working overtime for years, creating contingency plans for every possible interaction, just so you can ensure your own emotional safety. This state of constant regulation is physically demanding. You might notice it in the way your shoulders seem permanently hitched toward your ears, or in the way your jaw is clenched even while you're trying to relax. It's in the way your breathing becomes shallow and quick, as if you're ready to run or fight at a moment's notice. Your nervous system is trapped in a loop, treating your present, safe life as if it were still the unpredictable, unsafe one you left behind. It's like trying to run a marathon while holding your breath. It is no wonder you feel drained. It is no wonder that after a day of simple, ordinary tasks, You feel as though you have survived an entire ordeal. When you live this way, there is almost no energy left for the parts of life that actually nourish you. Joy, curiosity, and genuine connection require a certain amount of space, a sense of openness. But when you are fully occupied with the work of regulation, that space is completely taken up by the task of staying safe. You might find that you can't fully engage in a conversation because part of your mind is busy analyzing the situation. You might find that you can't truly enjoy a moment of stillness because you are waiting for the interruption. You are essentially working two jobs at once: the job of living your life and the full-time, unpaid position of protecting yourself from a perceived threat that is no longer there. Recognizing this fatigue is a moment of profound validation. It is the realization that your tiredness is not a sign of laziness or a lack of resilience. On the contrary, it is evidence of just how hard you have been working. You have been managing your internal weather with an intensity that is unsustainable. Yet you have kept it up because you didn't know there was any other way. Acknowledging this is the first step toward letting go. You are beginning to see that you don't need to be your own guard anymore. You are beginning to realize that the environment you are in right now is different from the one you remember. You can start to slowly, intentionally power down the systems that are no longer serving you. You can give yourself permission to be tired. And in that permission, you might finally find the room to start resting. The word broken is one of the most destructive labels we can ever apply to ourselves. When you call yourself broken, you are effectively declaring that you are a finished object, something that once held a specific, intended shape, and has now been shattered into jagged, unusable pieces. It implies that your value was tied to being whole, and because you have been damaged, you are somehow less than what you were before. But the truth is that you are not an object. You are not a piece of porcelain or a machine that has malfunctioned. You are a process. You are a human system in constant, beautiful, and complex motion. When we cling to the identity of being broken, we inadvertently stop looking for ways to grow. We focus all of our energy on the wreckage. We stare at the cracks. We measure the damage. And we spend our nights wondering how to glue ourselves back into the person we were before the trauma, before the hardship, or before the years of neglect. We treat ourselves like a puzzle that needs to be perfectly reassembled, fearing that if even one small piece is missing, we will never be right again. But the person you were before is not coming back. And in all honesty, that person wouldn't have the perspective, the depth, or the hard-earned wisdom that you carry today. The danger of the broken label is that it keeps you in a state of perpetual repair. You spend your life in the workshop filing down your edges, hiding your scars, and trying to act as though the impact never occurred. It is an exhausting, never-ending project. But what if you shifted the frame? What if, instead of viewing yourself as something that was destroyed, you viewed yourself as something that has been reshaped by the elements? Think of the way a river shapes a stone. It isn't broken because it is smooth and weathered. It is simply showing the history of the water that passed over it. Your experiences haven't ruined you. They have formed you. Moving beyond this label means stopping the attempt to mend yourself into a version of the past. It means accepting that your life is not a restoration project, but an ongoing evolution. You are not trying to fix the cracks. You are learning how to build a new capacity for how you hold your experiences. You are expanding the container of who you are. This is a much more hopeful, honest way to live. It acknowledges that you carry marks of the past, but it asserts that those marks do not define your future potential. When you let go of the idea that you are broken, you also let go of the shame that comes with it. Shame thrives in the dark, in the quiet belief that you are fundamentally damaged goods. But when you move toward the idea of becoming, you step out of the shadows. You start to see yourself as someone who is continuously learning, continuously adapting, and continuously discovering new ways to be present in the world. You aren't someone who needs to be fixed. You are someone who is learning how to be fully alive. This shift in perspective is the foundation of real healing. Healing isn't about going back to a time before you felt this way, or returning to a state of innocence you once possessed. It is about moving forward with a different kind of strength. The strength that comes from knowing you can handle your own internal world. It is about taking the pieces you have, the wisdom you've gathered, and the resilience you've built, and realizing that you have everything you need to create a life that feels authentic and deep. You don't need to be whole in the way you once defined it. You just need to be exactly who you are right now, with all your history and all your capacity to change. You are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a story that is still being written. And the next chapter is entirely yours to shape. There is a profound, often misunderstood difference between reliving an experience and simply being present with the residual effects of it. When we feel overwhelmed, our human instinct is to pull away, to disconnect, to numb the sensation, or to run as far as we can from the physical discomfort of our own history. We are taught, implicitly and explicitly, that if something hurts, we should move away from it. But the path to truly thriving involves the radical, counterintuitive act of staying. It is about choosing to stay with the sensation, even when it feels like the last thing on earth you want to do. Think about what happens when an old memory is triggered. Perhaps a specific tone of voice, a certain situation at work, or even a quiet moment alone triggers that familiar, hollow ache in your stomach, or that tightness in your throat. Your initial reflex is likely to say, "Not this again," or to try to distract yourself with work, screens, or busyness. We treat these feelings like intruders, trying to lock the door so they can't get in. But when you lock them out, you are also locking yourself in. You are trapped in a cycle of avoidance that keeps the past firmly in the driver's seat. Allowing presence is about the opposite of that resistance. It is the brave choice to notice the physical tension when you feel dismissed, unheard, or threatened. And instead of reacting to that feeling by closing down, you simply observe it. You take a breath, you feel your feet on the floor, and you say to yourself, I am feeling this right now. You are not trying to change the feeling. You are not trying to judge the feeling. You are just acknowledging it. You are essentially offering your own internal world the space to exist without being silenced or pushed away. It is a way of saying to your own body, I see you. I know you are remembering something difficult, and I am here with you. It is the act of becoming a kind, steady witness to your own life. When you stay present, you break the power of the memory. You show your nervous system that while the feeling is real, the threat it is reacting to is a relic of the past. You are reminding your system that you are safe in this present moment, even if your body remembers a time when you weren't. It is a quiet, daily practice of reparenting, of being the anchor that you never had when you were going through the initial experience. This isn't about wallowing or getting lost in the memory. It's about grounding yourself in the truth of your current reality. It is a way of saying, I am safe now. Every time you do this, you are teaching your nervous system a new lesson, that you have the capacity to handle discomfort without being overwhelmed by it. You are proving to yourself over and over again that you are the one in charge, not the memory. This process requires a great deal of patience. You might find that you can only stay with the feeling for a few seconds before you feel the urge to run. That is completely okay. You don't have to be a master of presence overnight. You can start small, with moments that feel manageable, breathing through the physical shifts, and just being aware of what is happening inside you. As you get more comfortable with this practice, you'll start to notice that the intensity of these moments begins to shift. They lose their sharpness. They become less like overwhelming tides and more like waves that you can observe from the shore. Ultimately, allowing presence is about reclaiming your own life from the grasp of the past. It is the ultimate act of self-respect. It shows that you value your own experience enough to hold it, to witness it, and to integrate it, rather than casting it aside as if it were something shameful or dangerous. By doing this, you are carving out a new space for yourself, a space where you are no longer defined by what happened to you, but by the strength you have discovered in the process of being present with yourself. You are no longer living in the shadows of what was. You are stepping into the light of what is. And in that light, you are finally free to become the person you were always meant to be. Carl Jung once offered the perspective that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But for many of us, the process of becoming feels less like an addition and more like a retrieval mission. Throughout our lives, we have unconsciously been forced to leave behind pieces of ourselves to survive. Maybe as a child, you were naturally curious, bubbling over with questions about how the world worked, only to be told that your questions were an interruption or a nuisance. So, you learned to be quiet. Maybe you were inherently expressive, full of color and loud laughter. But you realized early on that such brightness made others uncomfortable or drew unwanted attention. So, you dimmed your light. These discarded parts of yourself aren't gone. They have simply been waiting in the periphery. When we talk about healing, we often focus on fixing the bad parts. But the real work, the most beautiful work, is in reclaiming the good parts you abandoned. Integrating these pieces is a quiet, daily practice of homecoming. It's an act of defiance against the circumstances that told you that your true nature was somehow incorrect or unsafe. Think about the things you used to love before you convinced yourself you didn't have the time, the talent, or the right to enjoy them. Perhaps it was a specific way of creating, a certain style of dressing, or an unabashed enthusiasm for something that brings you genuine peace. When you push those parts of yourself away, you create a kind of internal fracture. You start to feel a lingering sense of incompleteness, as if you are playing a role that doesn't quite fit your actual frame. Reclaiming these parts is how you begin to close that gap. It doesn't happen through a massive, singular life event. It happens in the margins. It's picking up a hobby you abandoned years ago, not to be good at it, but simply to honor that part of yourself that once loved it. It's allowing yourself to express an opinion you usually keep locked behind your teeth because you're afraid of being judged. It's giving yourself permission to be playful when your internal critic tells you that you should be serious or productive. Every time you let one of these pieces back into your life, you are sending a message to yourself. I am finally safe enough to be the whole person I was meant to be. This integration is sometimes uncomfortable. When you start to pull these pieces out of the shadows, you might feel a rush of grief for the time they spent in exile. You might feel a surge of anger at the situations that forced you to hide them in the first place. That is natural. It is a sign that you are waking up. Don't rush past that feeling. Acknowledge it, hold it, and then lean into the joy of the reunion. You are inviting these parts back home, and in doing so, you are creating a more resilient, multifaceted version of yourself. This is the essence of becoming. It isn't about building a new persona from scratch. It's about archaeology. You are digging through the layers of your survival to find the original, unadulterated version of you that was there all along. When you finally stop apologizing for your interests, your quirks, and your unique way of seeing the world, you start to feel a sense of alignment that was impossible when you were keeping those parts hidden. The broken feeling starts to evaporate, replaced by a sense of wholeness that isn't dependent on the world's approval, but on your own commitment to your own authenticity. You deserve to be the entirety of your own being. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to be fixed to be worthy of your own attention. You just have to be willing to start letting the discarded parts come back into the light, one small act at a time. It is a slow, steady return to yourself, and it is perhaps the most important journey you will ever take. You are not a collection of fragments. You are a living, breathing work of art that is finally being restored to its full, vibrant color. Take your time, be gentle, and keep calling those parts of yourself home. When you have spent years, perhaps even decades, operating from a place of defense, your brain has become an expert at predicting threats. It is a brilliant, high-speed computer that constantly scans the horizon, looking for signs that you are about to be let down, rejected, or overwhelmed. It is so good at this that it doesn't even wait for evidence. It assumes the threat is already there. This is why you might find yourself bracing for impact in a conversation that is actually supportive, or why you might pull away from a connection just as it starts to feel good. You are trapped in a feedback loop where your history is dictating your present, and your present is simply confirming the fears of your past. To break this, we have to consciously, deliberately build new internal patterns. This is not about positive thinking, and it certainly isn't about ignoring the difficulties of your life. It is about the much harder, more rewarding work of retraining your senses to notice the truth of your current reality. Think of it like walking a new path through a dense forest. For years, you have walked the same rutted, familiar road, the one that leads to caution, isolation, or self-doubt. The new path is overgrown, difficult to see, and requires a lot of effort to clear. At first, you will constantly find your feet slipping back into that old, comfortable rut. That is not a failure. It is simply what your brain is accustomed to doing. Cultivating new patterns starts with the smallest possible moments of observation. When you are in a situation where your internal alarm starts to ring, that familiar tightness, the urge to withdraw, the assumption that you are about to be hurt, try to pause. Take a deep, intentional breath. Ask yourself a very simple question. Is this threat happening right now, in this room, with this person? Often the answer is no. You might realize that you are reacting to a ghost from 20 years ago, rather than the person standing in front of you. Once you notice that, you have created a moment of choice. You can say to yourself, I feel afraid, but I am actually safe. This person is not the person who hurt me. This moment is not the moment I remember. This is the core of the work. You are essentially teaching your nervous system that the map it has been using for years is outdated. It is like updating the software on a computer. The old version served you well when it was all you had, but it's causing bugs in your current life. This process requires a tremendous amount of patience. There will be days when you do this perfectly, and days when you slip back into your old ways without even noticing until it's over. That is entirely normal. You are rewiring your responses, and that doesn't happen overnight. It happens through hundreds of small, repeated acts of consciousness. It's like tending a garden. You have to keep clearing the weeds of your old reactions over and over until the new plants, the ones of trust, openness, and calm, have enough room to grow. As you keep practicing this, you will notice something profound happening. The old reactions won't disappear entirely, but they will start to lose their urgency. You won't feel the same automatic need to jump into defense mode. you will have a little more space, a little more room to breathe, and a little more capacity to see things as they really are. You are building a new internal map, one that prioritizes your current reality rather than your past predictions. You are creating a sense of safety that is built on the foundation of your own presence, not on the hope that the outside world will remain perfect. This is the most profound form of self-parenting you can offer yourself. You are becoming the protector you always needed, the one who looks at the situation and says, "I see why you are scared. But look, we are okay. We can handle this. We don't have to hide anymore." It is a beautiful, transformative way to live. And the more you practice it, the more you will find that you aren't just reacting to life. You are starting to engage with it, fully and truly, from a place of growing power and internal peace. The most profound, reliable safety you will ever find is the safety you cultivate within the walls of your own being. For so long, we are conditioned to believe that stability is an external commodity, something we have to earn, something we have to coax out of other people, or something that is dependent on our environment being calm and predictable. We look for the right relationship, the right job, or the right circumstances, hoping that if we can just arrange the pieces of our lives perfectly, we will finally be able to stop shaking. But life is inherently unpredictable. And when you tether your internal stability to external factors, you leave yourself vulnerable to every shift in the wind. Finding stability in your own presence is about shifting that anchor inward. It's the realization that you have the capacity to be your own container. When you are in the middle of an emotional storm, when the world feels overwhelming, when you are flooded with anxiety, or when you are triggered by a memory of a time you were left unsupported, you don't have to look for someone else to come and fix it. You can learn how to turn your attention toward yourself with the same warmth, care, and firm reassurance that you would offer a person you truly loved. This is not about retreating into isolation or shutting people out of your life. It's about knowing that you can handle your own internal weather, no matter how loud the thunder gets. When you learn to breathe through the moments of high tension, when you learn to physically soothe your own nervous system by softening your jaw or slowing your heart rate, you stop needing the outside world to be perfect for you to feel okay. You stop looking for others to rescue you from your feelings, which actually allows you to show up in your relationships in a much more authentic and present way. You are no longer asking people to carry the weight of your internal regulation. You are showing up as a whole, sturdy person. Think of it as developing a home base inside yourself. It is a quiet, inner room where you can retreat when things get loud, even if you are in the middle of a conflict or facing a challenge that feels impossible. You can mentally and physically touch base with that inner stability. You remind yourself, I am here. I am capable of feeling this discomfort without being destroyed by it. I am the one experiencing this, but I am also the one holding it. This is an incredibly empowering shift. It transforms your relationship with your own emotions. Instead of fearing them, you start to view them as information that you are perfectly capable of processing. This type of stability is built in the small, quiet moments of your day. It's in the way you choose to speak to yourself when you make a mistake, replacing the harshness of a critic with the gentle voice of a mentor. It's in the way you acknowledge your own physical needs, taking a glass of water, walking outside, or simply sitting in silence for 5 minutes just to check in with your heart. You are creating a consistent, loving relationship with yourself. You are building a track record of reliability. You are showing your own nervous system that no matter what happens, you are going to be there for you. When you become your own source of stability, your whole life changes. You become less reactive, less prone to the wild swings of anxiety, and more capable of standing in the middle of the mess with a sense of groundedness. You might still feel pain. You might still feel fear. But these things no longer carry the weight of an existential threat. You know that you are not going to fall apart because you are the one holding the pieces together. This is the moment where healing stops feeling like a project or a chore and starts to feel like a way of life. You are no longer living in a state of reaction to the world. You are living in a state of residence within yourself. And that, more than anything else, is the true meaning of coming home. The horizon of thriving is not a magical destination where the clouds part forever, never to gather again. It isn't a place where pain, worry, or difficult emotions are permanently erased from your calendar. If you spend your life waiting for the moment when everything becomes perfectly easy, you will miss the beauty of the life you are actually living. True thriving is not the absence of trouble. It is the presence of an internal resourcefulness that allows you to meet whatever happens with clarity, presence, and a sense of enduring connection to yourself. It is a state of being where you have developed the capacity to walk through the fire without becoming the fire itself. When you look toward this horizon, try to see it not as a finish line, but as a broadening of your internal landscape. Imagine that, for a long time, you were living in a small, cramped room. A room built by the fear of being seen or the necessity of being guarded. Thriving is the process of slowly opening the doors and windows, realizing that the world is much larger, and that you have the space to move within it. There may still be storms. You will still experience heartbreak. You will still encounter challenges, and there will absolutely be days where the old patterns of survival try to pull you back into that cramped, familiar room. But the difference now is that you no longer live there. You are simply visiting. You have the perspective to look at those old, defensive patterns and recognize them for what they truly are. Echoes from a time when you were doing the absolute best you could to survive something very difficult. You can look at them with a sense of gentle recognition rather than judgment. You can say, "I see you, but we don't need you anymore." You have the ability to observe these flare-ups without being owned by them. You are no longer the victim of your own history. You are the person who has lived through it, navigated it, and emerged on the other side with a wisdom that is uniquely your own. Thriving is the quiet, daily decision to lean into the reality of who you are, rather than the reality you were forced to adopt to survive. It is found in the moments where you choose to be honest about your needs, even when it feels vulnerable. It is found when you honor your own boundaries, not out of fear, but out of a deep respect for your own worth. It is found when you allow yourself to enjoy small moments of peace, connection, and joy without immediately scanning for the next complication. It is a radical, courageous reclamation of your right to exist exactly as you are, without the constant need for an apology or an explanation. You are not the things that happened to you. You are not the trauma. You are not the neglect. And you are not the moments where you felt broken. You are the person who lived through all of that. You are the person who is now, finally, learning how to listen to your own voice and how to trust your own instincts. That is a miracle. It is the result of years of hidden, often invisible, effort. You have been doing the work, even when you didn't have a name for it, even when you felt like you were failing. The fact that you are standing here, willing to look at your life with this level of honesty, is evidence that you are not just surviving. You are moving toward something much deeper. The horizon you are moving toward is a life where your history is part of your story, but not the entirety of your future. It is a life where you have the resources to meet your experiences with a steadiness that feels like a homecoming. You are building a life that is wide enough to hold your joys and your sorrows, your strengths and your vulnerabilities, all at once. Take a deep breath and acknowledge how far you have come from that initial, heavy feeling of being broken. You have traveled a long, difficult path to reach this vantage point. Keep going. The view from here is yours, and it is only just beginning. You are not just mending. You are becoming, and that is the most beautiful thing you can do.